Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Strong Draws. My name is Brett Strong, and today I am doing the inks of the Miss Martian that I did in the last video. So, excuse me, as I did in the last video, this one's a little bit more slowed down so you can kind of see step by step kind of my inking process. So, after finishing in Photoshop, turning it blue and bringing it into Manga Studio 4EX. Start with the pressure sensitive brush of, I think I used the G pen, and we'll start with the eyes here. And as you can see, what it does is the harder you push on the tablet, the thicker the line you get, and vice versa. So you can get these real sweeping lines and start them thin in the corner of the eye, get thick at the top where the lashes get a bit thicker, and then taper off towards the tip of the eyelash. So here, since drawing a straight on face is a little difficult and it's hard to get everything to match, it's just copy and paste the eye to make the process go a little bit quicker, a little bit easier for me. So now what I've done is, as I've said in other videos, is I like to keep more of the traditional look that I am used to, or that I usually do, which is I use Pigma microns to ink usually when I'm doing inking on pencil paper. So to recreate that look, I just use the magic marker tool, and I think I keep it at about, depending on the piece, I mean it varies, but this is I think a 0.25 brush, and I just go in and do all the line work with just this one. Now what it kind of does is kind of keeps everything a little more straightforward, a little more honest. You can't hide things quite as easily with a dead brush like you can, I think, with a pressure sensitive brush, just because you have to get all the lines in there in the right spot, in the right place, and you're not really hiding behind shadows and black spots and over rendering with line work just to make a piece that maybe not solid but looks kind of cool. So what it does is just kind of keeps everything a little more honest, a little more solid looking, at least in my opinion. And again, it's just what I'm used to, kind of the look I kind of worked out over the past few years of what I like. So now, kind of what I addressed in my last video. All my pencils, at least for when I kind of just do this kind of thing, are very loose. And the reason for that is like I was saying, since it keeps, the more you refine something, the more kind of lifeless it becomes. Or not necessarily lifeless, but more stiff and posed, because you're so busy trying to get everything just perfect. By leaving the lines a little bit looser like this and inking on top of it, it still gives you a lot of room to play and experiment and see what you can come up with, and it just keeps it all from looking a little too clean and pristine and stiff looking. I think it makes it a little more, makes for a more interesting piece of artwork. So just working on her hair. With hair, you gotta kind of work in layers, kind of build it up on top of each other and back into space, and kind of the way I do it, as you can see here, is I call it stacking lines. I'm sure I've heard that somewhere before. I'm just not sure where, but by stacking these lines kind of like on top of each other a little bit, what you get is this sense of depth, or the sense of something sitting on top of something else. So the closer you put the lines, or where you end the lines, it creates this 3D effect and it's something that comes in handy in almost everything you do, especially when you're doing textures or hair, for instance, like I said in this one. So you see some of the lines go over each other, go behind each other. They seem to come from a different part of the head than where the other lines come from. And the thing to keep in mind when drawing hair is, even though someone may have long hair and it all looks one length, the thing you have to kind of keep in mind is that hair isn't necessarily all the same length, because it is coming from different parts of the head. So even if you have somebody with really long hair and then they get it cut straight across, there's parts of the hair that's different lengths just because it's growing out of different parts of the head. And so when you're drawing the hair, like where you can see her hair kind of comes out and you can see back behind around the back of her neck, that hair is coming from the back of her head, not the top of her head, like the stuff in the front. So it's going to fall different. It's going to come in at a different angle. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind when you're drawing your hair. Alright, now we're moving down to her body here, on her torso. Just trying to get everything. Like I said, you'll see I'm inking, but I'm not really tracing. The pencils are just a guideline kind of idea of what I want to be there, where it needs to be, and again, I just kind of let it fly and see what I like, what I don't like, what can be moved up, moved in, pushed down, moved over, whatever, until I get exactly kind of the look I'm looking for here. So I kind of wanted to address something I've heard a few times now, as far as comments to my videos and whatnot, that this stuff kind of looks easy for me, or I make it look easy, I guess, to an extent. It's weird for me to say that out loud, but this is just what I've got as far as responses to my videos, is I make it look easy. And the other thing I've heard a couple times is the reason it looks easier, or I do what I do, or can do this, is because I work digitally. Or at least the digital might make it a little bit easier. The fact of the matter is, if you can't draw on paper with a pencil or pen or whatever, you can't get these results digitally. If this looks at all easy for me, or whatever you want to call it, it's not because I'm doing it on a computer. It's because I've spent years working on my fundamentals. I've worked real hard and done all the studying, all the many hours of sleepless nights and long hours of just sitting with a piece of paper and a pencil, learning to do what I do. Now, granted, these Young Justice pinups aren't terribly complicated poses. They're all pretty much the same pose, and that's just because I have, just kind of just doing them as a series of just pinup hero shots, I guess you want to call them. But digital, the advantage you have with digital is that you can be more experimental. Like, if I was actually drawing this on pencil and paper, I wouldn't leave my pencils maybe quite so loose and just let it fly. At least not if it's something I want it to be a finished piece. With digital, I can back up and I can erase, and I can try a few different things without worrying about messing it up. But it doesn't make it necessarily easier. As a good friend of mine, Nick, always says, there's not a make it cool button on the computer that's going to make you a better artist or make the drawing look that much cooler. If you don't know your fundamentals and you don't do the work, digital or paper, it's never going to be as good as you want it to be. Like, as you can see, the pen moves wherever my hand goes. It's like I'm drawing on paper, it's just I'm actually doing it on a digital tablet. So if there's anybody out there that thinks that if I go digital or if I get a Wacom tablet, you know, or I get a Cintiq, just imagine how much better my artwork would be. The fact of the matter is, it's not going to help you unless you study and learn learn how to do your craft. So I'm sorry if I sound like I'm angry about it. I'm not. I'm just trying to I just want people to understand that no matter what medium you choose to work in, you have to know what you're doing to get the results you want. It doesn't, you know, Photoshop, Manga Studio, the tablet, the computer, they're just tools, no different from your pencil and paper. It's just a different kind of tool, and you get certain advantages from using them that you don't necessarily get working traditionally, but it doesn't necessarily make you a better artist. So again, if you want to do this, or if you want to be an artist, or you wanted to make comics, don't worry about what you're using as far as your tools. Worry about learning how to do what you want to do, because the studying, the practice, the hours and hours of sitting at your desk or in your room or wherever you guys like to draw, that's what's going to make you a better artist, not the tools you use. So just thought I'd cover that, because there seems to be a big debate over digital versus traditional and so on and so forth. So that's just kind of my 2 cents thrown in there. So now we're working on her legs here, just kind of moving stuff in, kind of making them a little more shapely than they were originally, maybe a little more muscular looking. And you'll see there's times where I'll do, like right there, kind of these double lines where they kind of mirror each other a little bit, or um, one they kind of one convex line, one concave line, kind of next to each other to an extent, I guess you could say, or two convex lines back to back, or whatever you want to call it, to kind of get like on her shin or her calf there. I do those two lines next to each other. It's just kind of a aesthetic thing. It doesn't really show any kind of shape or form. It's more of just kind of a pretty style thing. It doesn't really do anything necessarily. I mean, the one line can do just as much of the work as the two, but I don't know why. Just something I've started doing over the years that I kind of like. There's no real purpose to it other than I think it looks cool. So getting her boots in here a little bit. And now I think we're going to do the cape here. And again, I'm going to kind of play around with it a little bit more than it was originally, because it looked a little more dead than I wanted it to, a little less lifeless. So I'm trying to remember if that's what I ended up sticking with or not. Didn't like her knee here. So again, this process is just like it would be any other way. You know, you keep going in, you move stuff, you push it in, pull it out, you raise lower. You just kind of mess with it, carve it out until you get the results you're kind of looking for. So, and you know, you pull out, you kind of take a look at it, make sure. Again, if you're working digitally, it's good to get a look at the full thing, or the full piece that you're working on, to make sure that it is getting the results you want. So now I'm going in with the contour line around the whole outside of everything. The reason I do this is it just kind of makes it pop a little bit off the page. And I've also found that when it comes to coloring, if you guys do end up wanting to go in to take this to color, it makes it really simple to get your flats rolling. It helps a lot. since flat seems to be the most boring part of colors, like if you have this bold contour line around everything, what you can do is when you get it into Photoshop or wherever you color, if you take your wand tool and select the white canvas, I guess you can call it, around everything, you can just inverse that and then fill the color and start from there. And that all depends on the way you color, I guess, too. But that's the way I kind of like to flat. So it just, like I said, I just found it really helps with coloring when you have this bold outline around everything. And I also use it, I mean, not just to outline the whole figure, but as you can see, I go around the arms, the hands, and what it does is it kind of pops everything off and kind of gives it a little more dimension. It's just a real quick, easy way to make everything kind of separated and, again, just pop off of each other and not look quite so dead. As much as I like it, this is kind of the putting that contour around everything. That's kind of the flatting, the equivalent to flatting something in your colors. It's kind of boring and tedious and takes up time, but it's just at least for the style or the look I kind of like. It's a necessary evil of drawing it. So. And I think I use, and again, it depends on the size of the piece and what the effect I'm trying to go for. But I think on this one, that magic marker tool is bumped up to about a 0.70 for this contour. If it was a smaller piece, it might not be quite as thick, but I found if you go too thick around with it, and again, it's all taste and preference, but I found if you go too thick with this contour line, it really kind of makes it look a little bit goofy, I guess, to an extent, because I think it starts to mess with your proportions and some of your detail if you go too thick with that contour line. Now I'm just using the curved line tool to get the cape done here. I think that's all for the contour part of it. Now we'll make a new layer, and looks like I'm going to do, looks like the line weights and rendering. I don't think I put any overall heavy blacks on Miss Martian here, but there will be some heavier lined blacks just to again, just to kind of give it a little bit more life, a little more depth to her, so she's not quite so color booky. And I've switched back to the G pen, which I think when I do this process, I fluctuate between 1.5 and a 0.7, depending on what kind of line I'm trying to get and how heavy my hand is that day. I mean, it sounds weird, but there's days where I push a little bit harder on the tablet than I did the day before. I can't get quite the thin line from the G pen that I had been the day before. So sometimes I'll vary in the size up of the pen just to get the results I'm looking for. And so kind of want the light source to be coming from the top right to a certain extent. So you'll see all the shadows are going to fall off to our left side here a little bit. And as far as the line weights go, this is something you can kind of, it's just something, again, it's all kind of preference and taste as far as where to add them, when to add them. There's certain artists that don't do it at all. Frank Whiteley does it very, very little, if at all, in some of his stuff. He uses all kind of a deadline look to it, and it looks fantastic. It's just, it's all preference. And to how thick those lines are going to be, how many of those lines there's going to be, what parts are going to get the line weights. It's all kind of just your preference and taste and experimentation. I just use it mainly to, instead of certain areas where there might be a solid shadow, I'll use just a little bit of a line weight to show that there's a shadow there, or that there's a raised edge, or a cast shadow. More than anything, I know I've said this before in other videos, but since I know I'm going to be coloring this, I didn't want to cover it up too much with blacks and cross hatching, and just let the colors kind of tell the story there. And there's all kinds of, tick marks and broken lines and stuff. The broken lines just, I think, make stuff look a little more interesting. You can make a straight line, erase parts of it, and the human brain will connect them for you, so that the people, or the viewer, or whoever, will get the idea of what you're trying to go for, without it being quite so bold and, I guess, boring to an extent. Again, it's just a taste thing of mine, that it adds a little bit more visual interest than a solid line would. And for like these parts, like under her cape or in the folds, that's all just basically cast shadows from where the fabric is either laying over her chest there, or over itself within the cape. And there's certain lines, you just add for, I guess, aesthetic looks. I mean, I personally try not to do it too much, because I think it gets a little muddy looking if you add too many. But there's something to be said about just adding eye candy to it to an extent. I think I'm going to add the sheen to her belt buckle here. Drawing metal and those, I've heard them called majesty lines, those black lines in there that make it look shiny. That's another thing that just takes a lot of practice. There's certain tricks and things that I've kind of come to like over the years. It's and again, it varies depending on what you're working on. Like if I was to do a Silver Surfer and an Iron Man, those majesty lines would look a little bit different than if I'm just doing like her belt buckle. So it's something, again, you kind of have to study and see how other artists do it. If you can, some like it, make it represent some make it represent kind of the reflection of whatever's there. Some just do it to make it look shiny on its own. Doesn't actually even necessarily have to be affected by the environment, but it looks, again, it's just different different techniques, and all to kind of what you guys like, or what your tastes are as far as comic book art. Now, to be quite honest, her kneecaps are something I'm really not happy with as far as this piece goes. But again, again, these are more for fun. They're in my sketchbook, so they're all about experimenting and just trying to get my techniques down and get a little bit more speed in my artwork, or with my artwork. So not everything on here is perfect, and not everything I think has to be necessarily perfect all the time, but do the best you can. So, alright, I'm going to add the seams to some stuff here. Looks like we're kind of coming to the end of the video. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. Again, this will be the last one I do of the Young Justice series, I guess I'm doing, of all the characters. So there won't be a coloring video for this one, so if you want to check out the colored version and the other pinups, head over to my Facebook page or my Twitter page. Links are in the description below, and they will all be up there. They all will be colored and whatnot. So I think we're pretty much done here. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the description below, or the comment section below. Otherwise, yeah, check out my Facebook page to see the final colored version of this, and or Twitter. So we'll catch you next time, guys. So have a good day. Bye.